What do you do when the entire world turns its eyes against you, when every whispered conversation in the shadows carries your name like a curse, when every gesture, every smile, every false display of warmth is merely a mask stretched thin over hidden contempt? This is where Machiavelli begins, not in the comfort of allies or the gentle illusion of loyalty, but in the cold, merciless landscape of human hostility. He understood something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, that there will come a moment when you stand utterly alone, when no one believes in you, when the people you trusted dissolve into smoke, and when your survival depends not on who supports you, but on who cannot stop you. And it is in this moment, this terrifying fracture in your personal history, that you discover the truth he spent his life carving into the minds of rulers and thinkers. People do not move for the sake of your dreams. They move for the sake of their fear, their envy, their instinct for self-preservation. When everyone is against you, they are not opposing your existence, they are protecting their own. Machiavelli saw through the sentimental illusions of friendship and cooperation. He believed that the world becomes clearest only when the knives come out, when the air thickens with tension, and when the true nature of human hearts rises to the surface like oil on water. That is when you finally see the architecture of ambition, the scaffolding of power, the invisible rules etched beneath every gesture and every lie. Imagine standing in a room where every face is turned toward you, but not with admiration. No, the eyes lock onto you like traps. You feel the weight of unspoken accusations, the quiet smoldering of resentment, the subtle tightening of jaws. In this room, innocence does not matter. Your intentions do not matter. The truth does not matter. All that matters is perception, momentum, and advantage. Here lies Machiavelli's darkest and most necessary law. When you cannot win with their support, you must win against their resistance. And to do that, you must understand the psychology of the hunted, the exiled, the cornered predator whose claws sharpen the moment hope is removed. Because being alone is not a weakness. Being outnumbered is not a defeat. Being doubted, hated, underestimated, these are not curses. They are invitations to transform. They are the furnace and you are the metal. They are the storm and you are the lightning. They are the darkness and you are the one who learns to see in it. Machiavelli believed that a person becomes truly dangerous only when they abandon the fantasy of fairness. When you stop expecting the world to treat you with justice, you begin to navigate it with clarity. When you stop hoping for help, you begin to understand your power. When you stop asking for permission, you discover how quickly obstacles crumble. And when the world finally turns against you, when every voice seems to rise in opposition, that is when the mind sharpens into something extraordinary. That is when strategy becomes instinct, when hesitation rots away, and when you begin to see that power is not found in numbers, it is found in certainty. But certainty does not appear on its own. It is forged through suffering, through betrayal, through the shock of realizing that the people who once smiled at you now watch you drown with calm indifference. Machiavelli observed this countless times in the courts of Florence, watching men rise and fall like smoke. He saw how their confidence collapsed the moment they lost the approval of others. He saw how their hands trembled when the crowd turned cold. And he understood that the common mind shatters under pressure because it has never learned the art of internal sovereignty. Internal sovereignty. This is the invisible kingdom that no enemy can invade. It is the unbreakable core forged when you learn to stand without applause, without reassurance, without anyone whispering your name with affection. It is the deep, grounded certainty that your path is your path, even if every other footstep turns away from it. Most people crumble when abandoned. The Machiavellian mind awakens. It becomes precise, deliberate, unstoppable. Because when the world is against you, you learn to see people not as friends or enemies, but as forces. Some push, some pull, some block, some weaken, some accelerate your movement without ever intending to. And once you view people as forces rather than emotional anchors, their hostility ceases to wound you. Their resistance becomes useful. Their opposition becomes data. Their attempts to sabotage you become predictions you can calculate and manipulate. This is what Machiavelli meant when he implied that the wise ruler uses even his enemies as tools. Picture yourself walking through a corridor filled with silent observers. People who hope you fail, who analyze every step, who feed on any sign of weakness. You feel the tension in the air, the tightening of their breath, the cold fascination with your possible downfall. And yet, the Machiavellian mind does not flinch. It understands that the eyes watching you are not threats, they are signals. To see enemies clearly is to possess an advantage beyond measure. Your enemies reveal their intentions through their stares, their silence, their avoidance, their patterns. People who hate you are far more predictable than those who claim to love you. Hatred is honest. Envy is consistent. Fear is mechanical. These emotions follow rules, and rules can be exploited. But the deeper truth, the one Machiavelli whispered beneath the surface of all his advice, is that there is no greater weapon than the person who has learned to bear isolation without losing their fire. Anyone can fight with a crowd behind them, but to move through darkness when voices turn against you, to continue when your name is stained, to push forward when every path seems blocked, this is power. The world respects the individual who refuses to collapse. Even those who wish to destroy you are forced to acknowledge your resilience. They may still oppose you, but they begin to fear you. And fear alters the battlefield. Fear sharpens your outline in their minds. Fear makes them hesitate. Fear makes them miscalculate. Fear makes them expose their weaknesses through overreaction. When everyone is against you, their unity is fragile, built on mutual resentment and shared fantasies. If you remain steady, their alliances begin to crack. Their whispers turn into doubts. Their confidence dissolves. People bond quickly through hatred, but they fracture just as quickly when the target refuses to break. And so the question becomes, how do you stand firm when the noise grows deafening, when accusations multiply, when the crowd moves like a single violent tide? Machiavelli's answer was simple but brutal. You anchor yourself in a truth deeper than approval. You anchor yourself in purpose. A person who possesses a clear purpose becomes immune to the emotional turbulence of others. The world may shift, opinions may swing, accusations may rise and fall like storms, but the one who knows why they move never loses direction. Purpose is a shield, but it is also a weapon. It draws the mind forward and prevents emotional sabotage from eroding your focus. Purpose is not a slogan. It is a vow whispered to yourself in the darkest hour. It is the refusal to bend. It is the unyielding voice that tells you, continue, even if every path is blocked, even if the world rages against you. And when you continue, when you take one step after another, you become something rare, a person whose movement no longer depends on external permission, a person who keeps rising not because the world lifts them, but because they push upward through the weight of opposition. Machiavelli recognized that most people are incapable of this transformation. They cling to approval like a drowning man clings to a piece of wood. They need validation to breathe. They need sympathy to act. They need support to move. But when that support vanishes, they collapse into themselves. They become desperate, reactive, impulsive, incoherent. They lose the ability to think strategically. They lose the ability to adapt. They lose the ability to choose. But the one who learns to navigate isolation becomes a different kind of creature, a creature forged in silence, a creature sharpened by rejection, a creature who has looked into the abyss and discovered that it cannot consume them. This creature becomes capable of extraordinary strategy because they no longer rely on emotion to dictate their path. They do not panic when cornered. They do not fear being misunderstood. They do not beg for recognition. They simply move. And that calm, relentless movement terrifies your enemies more than any threat could. When everyone is against you, Machiavelli believed you should not attempt to restore their goodwill. You should not plead, explain, justify, or bargain. People who have decided to oppose you do not want truth. They want victory. They want to feel superior. They want to see you shrink. When you refuse to shrink, when you remain unmoved, their entire strategy collapses. They become frustrated. They become sloppy, they reveal themselves, and the moment they reveal themselves, you acquire the leverage you need, because winning when everyone is against you is not about overpowering them. It is about outlasting them. The crowd is loud but fragile. The mob is aggressive but easily dispersed. Hatred burns hot but dies quickly when it is not fed. Opposition feels overwhelming but it is temporary. And the person who knows how to remain still in the storm becomes the one who commands the weather itself. In the shadows of Florence, Machiavelli watched men lose everything because they feared being alone. He watched them flee, hide, surrender, betray themselves. But he also witnessed something else, something far more dangerous. He saw men who learned to stand even when surrounded by enemies, men who smiled at the hostility, men who walked through the city knowing that every alley concealed a knife, and yet they moved with a terrifying calm. These were the men who truly understood power. Because when you no longer fear the crowd can no longer control you, and this is where Machiavelli's darkest law begins. When everyone turns against you, do not break, do not tremble, do not shrink. Become immovable, become inevitable, become the force they cannot silence, the presence they cannot erase, the storm they cannot escape. Because the moment you refuse to collapse under their hostility, the moment you continue forward despite their resistance, you cease to be the target, and you become the one who shapes the battlefield. This is how you win when everyone is against you, not by begging, not by pleading, not by explaining, but by becoming so focused, so certain, so unbreakable that their hatred becomes irrelevant. This is where your transformation begins. When you first realize that everyone is against you, the shock is sharp, but it is not the shock that destroys you. It is the silence that follows. The silence where you hear your own breathing, feel your own heartbeat, and recognize that no one, absolutely no one, is standing beside you anymore. It is in this silence that you confront a truth most people spend their entire lives running from: you are alone, and the world does not care. Machiavelli believed that this moment, this stripping away of illusions, is not a tragedy. It is a beginning. It is the birth of a new kind of consciousness. The consciousness of someone who has nothing left to rely on except their own strategy, their own will, their own capacity to endure the hatred and rise above it. And yet, to rise above it, you must understand the nature of the hostility surrounding you. People do not unite against you because you are weak. Weakness is unthreatening. Weakness is ignored. Weakness is pitied. Weakness is dismissed with a shrug. No, the crowd gathers against you because something in you unsettles them. Something in you disrupts the comfortable narratives they feed themselves to sleep at night. There is a certain discomfort that radiates from individuals who refuse to bow, individuals who refuse to be small, individuals who carry ambition like a knife hidden beneath their coat. People sense it even before you fully recognize it yourself. They sense the potential for disruption. They sense your possibility for influence. They sense a future in which you do not need them, and that terrifies them. Machiavelli noticed that hostility is often the clearest indicator of hidden power. When people begin whispering about you, when their voices sharpen, when they analyze your every move with suspicion, it is because you have shifted from harmless to consequential. They fear what you might become. They fear the version of you that operates without their permission, and so they attempt to shame you, isolate you, corner you, weaken you. They want you to feel small. You sever the strings that bind you to their judgment. And once those strings are cut, you begin to see the truth behind their hostility. Not hatred, not moral outrage, but fear. Fear of your independence, fear of your clarity, fear of your potential. The world becomes especially hostile to individuals who learn to think for themselves. Someone who sees reality without the comforting fog of illusions is dangerous. Someone who refuses to be manipulated by guilt, shame, or flattery is uncontrollable. Someone who knows their own values cannot be bought. These individuals threaten the weak equilibrium that society depends on, the equilibrium that relies on conformity, approval, and the illusion of collective morality. Machiavelli believed that the most dangerous person in any society is the one who sees the world as it is, not as it pretends to be, and when you become this person, when you shed the lies others use to box you in, you are no longer simply disliked, you are treated as a threat. People do not merely distance themselves, they coordinate, they gossip, they weaponize your past, your mistakes, your silence. They build alliances with those who share their fear. They create narratives that reduce you to something simple, something manageable, something explainable. Because if they cannot predict you, they must at least diminish you. But here lies the paradox Machiavelli loved. The more they attempt to diminish you, the more attention they give you. The more they try to discredit you, the more they reveal their own insecurity. The more they watch you, the more power you hold. To be opposed is not to be forgotten. To be hated is not to be irrelevant. Their resistance is proof that you matter, proof that your presence disrupts the balance, proof that you are capable of shifting the environment simply by refusing to bow. And yet, Machiavelli also understood the psychological cost of this awareness. It is not easy to be the center of hostility. It is not easy to feel eyes burning into your back, to hear your name spoken with bitterness, to sense the coldness in the people you once trusted. It is not easy to walk into a room knowing you will not be welcomed, knowing some of them hope you fail, knowing others would celebrate your downfall. This is the price of independence. This is the cost of refusing to be controlled. There will be nights when you sit alone, replaying every insult, every betrayal, every false smile. Nights when the world feels like a sharp, unforgiving place. Nights when you wonder whether you should have stayed small, stayed silent, stayed comfortable. Nights when you crave the warmth of acceptance, even if acceptance requires your obedience. Nights when you question whether rising above the crowd is worth the loneliness that comes with it. Machiavelli never denied this pain. He embraced it. He believed that suffering is not proof of failure, but proof of evolution. The person who has never been betrayed has never stepped beyond the boundaries of ordinary life. The person who has never been hated has never challenged anything. The person who has never been isolated has never dared to grow. The world does not punish the harmless. The world punishes the powerful. The world does not turn against the insignificant. The world turns against the one who rises. Machiavelli saw this pattern everywhere. Every great leader, every visionary, every disruptor faced hostility long before they achieved influence. The hostility began not when they succeeded, but when they threatened to succeed, when they changed their posture, when they stopped obeying, when they refused to be predictable, when they stepped out of the role society assigned them and began crafting their own identity. The hostility was simply the world's reaction to someone refusing to remain in chains. But here is where Machiavelli's darkest law deepens. When everyone is against you, you must not merely survive their hostility, you must learn to use it. You must learn to let their opposition sharpen you, fuel you, inform you, and guide you. Hostility is signal. Hostility is clarity. Hostility is free intelligence delivered directly to your doorstep. Your enemies reveal their weaknesses the moment they reveal their hatred. They show you exactly what they fear. They show you exactly where the cracks in their alliances lie. They show you exactly how fragile their unity is. Enemies are more valuable than allies, Machiavelli believed, because allies hide their motives, but enemies expose them. Allies speak in soft lies. Enemies speak in harsh truths. Allies tell you what you want to hear. Enemies tell you what you must hear. Allies pretend to support you, but enemies cannot disguise their intentions. This honesty, this involuntary transparency, is a weapon that belongs not to them, but to you. Imagine walking through a city where every shadow is a watcher, every watcher a critic, every critic a potential enemy. To the ordinary mind, this is a nightmare. But to the Machiavellian mind, this is opportunity. Every critic gives you insight, every rumor gives you information, every attack reveals fear. Every insult is a map leading you to the weaknesses of those who speak it. The hostility becomes a battlefield on which only one person truly understands the terrain, and that person is you. But understanding the terrain is only the first step. To win when everyone is against you, you must step into a role most people are too fearful to embrace, the role of the quiet strategist. A strategist does not lash out. A strategist does not scream for fairness. A strategist does not panic when surrounded. A strategist watches. A strategist listens. A strategist moves with a rhythm no one else can predict. Because the moment you become unpredictable, you become uncontrollable. And the moment you become uncontrollable, you become dangerous. To the crowd, danger is not defined by violence. Danger is defined by autonomy. Someone who cannot be manipulated poses a threat to everyone who depends on manipulation for their sense of stability. Someone who cannot be intimidated reminds others of their own cowardice. Someone who refuses to bow exposes the weakness of those who always do, and so they turn against you, not because you did something wrong, but because you revealed something about them. This is Machiavelli's great insight. Your enemies do not arise because you are evil. They arise because you are evolving. They arise not because you attack, but because your existence shines a light on the things they hide within themselves. You show them their envy. You show them their insecurity. You show them their dependence on approval. You show them their conformity. You show them their fear. And people will always try to destroy the mirror that reveals the truth. Your task is not to break the mirror. Your task is to become the mirror that no one can shatter. This requires emotional discipline so sharp it feels like armor beneath your skin. Emotional discipline is the ability to feel everything and reveal nothing. It is the ability to absorb hostility without letting it distort your identity. It is the ability to think clearly while being attacked. It is the ability to stay still while others panic. It is the ability to remain silent while others scream for your downfall. Silence, Machiavelli believed, is one of the greatest strategic weapons. People cannot attack what they cannot define. They cannot predict what they cannot understand. They cannot disarm a threat they cannot hear. Silence makes the hostile crowd uneasy. They expect you to fight. They expect you to defend yourself. They expect you to fall into the traps they lay. When you answer with silence, you strip them of power. You deny them the performance they crave. You deny them the satisfaction of watching you react. And most importantly, you force them to reveal the true depth of their obsession with you. When you do not react, they escalate. They try harder to provoke you. They expose more of themselves. They speak louder, reveal secrets, make mistakes. Their frenzy becomes their downfall. Because hostility is not sustainable, hatred requires fuel. When you stop feeding the fire, the mob eventually burns itself out. And when the last flame dies, you remain standing while your enemies exhaust themselves. This is not passivity. This is strategy. The strategy of someone who understands that power is not loud, it is patient. Power does not chase validation, it builds its own reality. Power does not beg for allies, it transforms enemies into stepping stones. Power does not respond to noise, it outlasts it. In this silence, something else happens, something even more important. You begin to hear yourself. Not the version of yourself shaped by approval, not the version shaped by fear, not the version shaped by expectations. You hear the version shaped by truth, the real voice beneath the noise, the voice that knows what you want, the voice that knows where you are going, the voice that knows who you must become. When everyone is against you, your identity fractures, then reforms. You shed old layers like a snake shedding skin. You discard the timid self, the apologetic self, the self that feared rejection. You begin to build a new self, a self carved from your own vision rather than their illusions. And as this new self forms, something remarkable happens. The hostility that once felt overwhelming begins to lose its power. You stop fearing it, you stop reacting to it, you stop caring about it, and then, for the first time, you begin to control it. This is the moment Machiavelli considered the true emergence of power, the moment when opposition becomes irrelevant. The crowd still exists, the hostility still swirls, the whispers still float through the air, but they no longer touch you. They no longer penetrate your sense of purpose. Their hatred becomes nothing more than background noise, like wind against a fortress wall. You become the fortress. You become the storm. You become the figure who was meant to stand alone, because only those who stand alone can rise without limit. This is the second stage of Machiavelli's darkest law. To win when everyone is against you, you must stop being shaped by the world and begin shaping the world instead. You must transition from reactive to strategic, from emotional to deliberate, from hunted to hunter. You must become the one they feared you might become. There comes a moment in every life when the air shifts, when the weight of the world no longer feels like pressure but like invitation, when the hostility surrounding you becomes less of a threat and more of a training ground. This is the moment Machiavelli considered the turning point, the exact second when a person stops feeling hunted and starts recognizing that the hunt itself has forged a sharper, colder, more deliberate version of them. It is the moment when you stop trying to escape the hostility and begin walking toward it, understanding that inside those flames lies the blueprint of your evolution. Because if everyone is against you, then no one owns you anymore. And that is the most terrifying freedom a human being can possess. This transformation does not arrive with celebration. It arrives quietly, like a cold breath in the dark. You begin to feel something shift inside you, the collapse of old fears, the death of old identities, the erasure of the need for validation. At first it feels strange, like shedding a second skin. The need to be understood dies. The desire to be liked dissolves. The instinct to defend yourself becomes unnecessary. You no longer search the eyes of others for clues about your worth. You no longer adjust your steps to fit the expectations of people who would happily watch you fall. Machiavelli wrote about this moment indirectly, buried between lines that only those who have suffered would understand. He believed that rejection is not merely a wound, it is an initiation. It strips away illusions you didn't even know you carried, the illusion that people care about your intentions, the illusion that fairness governs human behavior, the illusion that kindness is reciprocated, the illusion that morality protects you, the illusion that truth saves you. When these illusions die, you experience a strange, unsettling rebirth. You begin to see the architecture of reality with unnerving clarity. The world stops being a stage where you perform for acceptance and becomes a battlefield where only strategy keeps you alive. It is here, in this stripped, raw, unfiltered awareness, that you realize something Machiavelli never stated directly but implied in every observation he made. Most people are terrified of someone who cannot be controlled emotionally. Someone who is calm when slandered. Someone who is silent when provoked. Someone who is focused when attacked. Someone who keeps moving forward even when surrounded by enemies. Independence is not admirable to the crowd, it is threatening. And the moment you become independent, the world treats you like a threat. But the truth hiding beneath this hostility is even darker. Their hatred is not about you. It is about the reflection you force them to confront. When you refuse to break under pressure, they see their own fragility. When you refuse to beg for approval, they see how much they depend on it. When you stop shrinking to make others comfortable, they see the smallness of their own lives. When you grow silently, steadily, without their permission, you expose the cages they trapped themselves in. And people will destroy anything that reminds them of their self-inflicted limitations. This is why the world turns against anyone who rises. Not because the rising person is dangerous in reality, but because they reveal the dormant potential within others. Potential that others are too afraid to chase. It is easier to attack the rising individual than confront the cowardice within oneself. And so hostility becomes the currency of the insecure. They throw it at you, hoping it will buy them weakness in you. And most people, unaware of Machiavelli's psychological laws, fold under this pressure. But the one who understands the nature of hostility does not fold. They transform. The first sign of transformation is emotional detachment, not coldness, but clarity. You begin to look at people not through the lens of desire or resentment, but through the lens of understanding. You see their motives without judgment. You recognize their fears without being pulled into them. You observe their hostility without internalizing it. Their words lose power. Their opinions lose weight. Their attempts to wound you become futile. And in that moment, when their attacks bounce off you like insects hitting steel, you become something that terrifies them, untouchable. Machiavelli believed that being untouchable did not mean being unreachable. It meant being unbreakable. It meant that your sense of self was no longer held hostage by the shifting moods of others. It meant that your identity was internally anchored rather than externally borrowed. It meant that you stopped existing as a character in their story and began existing as the author of your own. This shift creates an aura around you, silent, steady, intimidating. Without realizing it, you begin to exude a calmness that unsettles people. They cannot read you, they cannot predict you, they cannot guilt you, they cannot manipulate you. And when people cannot control you emotionally, they try to control you socially. They spread rumors, they distort narratives, they create alliances against you, they attempt to isolate you further. They hope that if you are rejected by all, you will finally kneel, but you don't kneel. This confuses them. And then it frightens them, because people are accustomed to others responding to pressure by breaking. When someone does not break, it exposes a new hierarchy, one not based on numbers or popularity, but on psychological strength. And psychological strength, Machiavelli believed, is the highest form of power. It is invisible, unspoken, and absolute. It makes people take a step back without knowing why. It makes them lower their voices around you. It makes them think twice before attacking again. The moment you stop fearing their rejection is the moment they begin to fear your presence. This reversal is one of the most profound shifts in human power dynamics. At first, everyone is against you, but then something begins to change, subtle at first, then unmistakable. People who once spoke confidently against you begin to hesitate. Their alliances, once bound by shared hatred, begin to fracture. They argue among themselves. They doubt the narrative. They wonder why you have not collapsed. They wonder what secret strength you possess. And eventually, one by one, they begin to fear they misjudged you. Enemies begin to question whether opposing you was wise. They reconsider their stance. They become cautious. Some even attempt to return quietly, pretending they were never against you. This is the irony Machiavelli observed throughout political history. Those who attack you when they believe you are weak will often seek your favor. When they realize you cannot be destroyed, your silence becomes your reputation. Your resilience becomes your legend. Your refusal to fall becomes the story they whisper when you are not in the room. But this is not the time to celebrate. This is the time to build. Hostility, once understood, becomes a forge. It molds you into someone you were not before. It gives you insight into human nature that no comfort could ever provide. It teaches you the shape of fear, the structure of deception, the anatomy of envy. It teaches you how the weak behave when threatened, how the powerful behave when challenged, and how the insecure behave when exposed. This knowledge is not theoretical, it is lived. It is inside your bones. People who have been loved their whole lives never develop this understanding. People who have been protected never gain this insight. People who have been supported never acquire this edge. Only those who have been opposed by the many learn the psychology of the crowd. Only those who have been betrayed by friends learn the psychology of loyalty. Only those who have been isolated learn the psychology of the self. Machiavelli believed that power comes not from being surrounded by allies, but from being able to walk through fire without losing your mind. A person who has experienced hostility without breaking develops a presence that cannot be faked. It is the presence of someone who has met the worst parts of human nature and remained intact. Someone who has looked into the abyss and refused to let it define them. Someone who has learned to use darkness as material, not as identity. Your enemies, in trying to destroy you, become your unwilling instructors. Every attack teaches you something. Every betrayal reveals something. Every accusation uncovers something. Their hostility becomes a roadmap, guiding you towards psychological mastery. But the next stage of Machiavelli's law is the most dangerous and the most liberating. After surviving their hatred, after understanding their motives, after mastering your emotional landscape, you begin to manipulate the hostility itself. Not through deception, but through direction. You allow their energy to flow in the direction that benefits you. You use their aggression to camouflage your plans. You use their distraction to move quietly. You use their obsession with your downfall to slip unnoticed into higher ground. Because when everyone is looking at you with hatred, they are not looking at what you are building. And what you are building is not for them. It is for you. Machiavelli understood that development done in silence is the deadliest form of growth. When you evolve privately, the world struggles to measure you. When you work in the dark, the world cannot sabotage you. When you sharpen your mind in solitude, the world cannot predict your movements. And when you finally step forward, transformed and undeniable, the world is forced to confront a version of you they never prepared for. This is why isolation is a blessing disguised as punishment. It forces you into the laboratory of the self. It pushes you into introspection, discipline, self-correction. You learn your strengths not through praise, but through confrontation. You learn your weaknesses not through comfort, but through failure. You learn resilience not through support, but through survival. By the time you emerge, hostility has lost its power over you. You no longer take it personally. You no longer interpret it as a measure of your worth. You see it as the world's natural reaction to someone who refuses to be predictable. You do not fear it. You do not resent it. You expect it. And this expectation turns hostility into a weapon you control. When everyone is against you, you have already won the most important battle, the battle within yourself. The world outside can no longer dictate your value, your movement, your vision. You become immune to emotional manipulation. You become impervious to social pressure. You become free in a way that terrifies the collective mind, and the collective mind always fears the free individual. This is the essence of Machiavelli's darkest law. The crowd destroys the weak, but it cannot touch the one who has burned away their weaknesses through suffering. The crowd devours the insecure, but it kneels before the one who is not intimidated by its noise. The crowd hates the independent, but it follows the inevitable. And when you rise from the ashes they tried to bury you in, when you stand unbroken, unshaken, unyielding, something remarkable happens. The world that once turned against you begins to orbit you, not out of love, not out of loyalty, but out of recognition of your strength, recognition of your resilience, recognition of your inevitability, because nothing is more frightening and more respected than the person who walks alone and still triumphs. This is how you win. When everyone is against you, you become the one thing they cannot destroy. Yourself, the version forged in fire, the version they unintentionally created through their hostility, the version you were always meant to become. You never truly understand the nature of power until you realize how quietly it moves in the shadows, how silently it rewires the minds of those who think they stand above you. Up to this point, you may have believed that the struggle you face is external, that the enemies around you are made of flesh and ambition, but Machiavelli knew the deeper truth. Your greatest obstacles are the illusions they project, the narratives they create, and the fears they ignite inside you. When everyone stands against you, the battlefield shifts from the physical to the psychological, from the visible world to the invisible maze inside your own mind. And it is in this space that the darkest law emerges, the law that separates those who collapse under pressure from those who rise through it, those who bow to the world from those who master it. Machiavelli always understood that the mind is the throne of power, and whoever controls it controls everything else, including the outcome of your war. The moment the world targets you, the first weapon it deploys is doubt. It whispers into your thoughts, cloaked as logic, masked as realism, pretending to be your own voice. It tells you that you are isolated, outnumbered, insufficient, incapable, doomed. But Machiavelli would have told you that this moment, the moment where you feel the crushing weight of your opponents pressing down on all sides, is the moment where the true nature of strategy begins. He understood that being surrounded is not a position of weakness, but a position of absolute clarity. When you are surrounded, when every escape seems blocked, when every ally has folded into silence, when every door has closed, something extraordinary happens within you. You stop lying to yourself, you stop pretending, you stop performing, you face what you actually are. And it's from this unfiltered confrontation that a new kind of strength can be born, if you choose to wield it. In Machiavelli's world, the prince who was adored was never safe, but the prince who was underestimated, cornered, underestimated by his enemies, that was the prince who became truly dangerous. When everyone is against you, your enemies think they understand you. They think they can predict your moves, anticipate your reactions, calculate your limits. They think the pressure will break you. But pressure does not break the person who knows how to turn it into fuel. Pressure forges, pressure sharpens, pressure extracts all weakness from the mind and leaves something harder than iron behind. Machiavelli believed that power is born from adversity, not comfort, from conflict, not peace, from scarcity, not abundance. So when the forces align against you, understand this. Your enemies are not merely trying to defeat you, they are unknowingly building you. There is a moment in every person's life where they realize that the crowd does not speak for truth, that the majority does not represent what is right, that the loudest voices are often the emptiest. When the world turns against you, you face a choice: fall under the weight of collective judgment, or rise by rejecting it entirely. Machiavelli's darkest law is that you must learn to detach from the approval of others, to sever the emotional thread that ties your worth to their perception. Approval is a chain disguised as applause. Validation is a leash disguised as praise. And when you break free from needing either, you become someone the world cannot predict or contain. You become someone capable of playing the long, silent, dangerous game that true power requires. You become fundamentally uncontrollable. Your enemies expect you to fight them head-on, to react from panic, to respond from emotion. They expect you to burn through your strength trying to extinguish every attack, every rumor, every betrayal. But Machiavelli understood something far more unsettling. You do not win by fighting every battle. You win by choosing the battles that shape the narrative. The world might be against you, but the world's attention is fragmented, impatient, and easily manipulated. When pressure mounts and eyes turn toward you, your silence becomes a weapon. Your unpredictability becomes a threat. your restraint becomes a statement. Machiavelli knew that the most frightening kind of opponent is the one who does not flinch, the one who does not react, the one who absorbs the blow but never breaks formation. When everyone expects a collapse and instead you offer stillness, discipline and poise, you become something they cannot categorize. And what cannot be categorized cannot be controlled. The darkest strategic advantage, Machiavelli taught, is the ability to appear weaker than you are while quietly gathering the power to strike. Those who rush to crush you will expose themselves. Those who plot against you will reveal their intentions prematurely. Those who betray you will expose their desperation. When all forces turn against you, your enemies inevitably overreach because they believe your defeat is guaranteed. This is the moment you learn to watch them more closely than ever. Their arrogance becomes your intelligence. Their noise becomes your signal. Their eagerness becomes their downfall. The prince who understands this never reacts immediately. He waits, he observes, he lets the attacks sharpen his understanding of the landscape. And when he moves with precision so devastating that the world believes it came from nowhere. But before any of this strategy can manifest, you must confront the part of yourself that fears isolation. Because isolation is the crucible where Machiavellian strength is forged. When no one believes in you, you learn to believe in yourself with a ferocity that cannot be shaken. When no one supports you, you learn to build an internal structure stronger than any external alliance could ever provide. When no one guides you, you develop an intuition that cannot be manipulated or distorted by anyone else's agenda. Machiavelli understood that isolation is where leaders are sculpted, where strategists are born, where dangerous individuals emerge. But most people crumble under isolation because they confuse it with abandonment. They confuse solitude with weakness. They confuse standing alone with being powerless. Yet the truth is that the most powerful people in history were those who walked alone at key moments, those who were willing to face the void without flinching. Standing alone does not weaken you. It removes the distractions that weaken you. When voices fall away, when noise dissolves, when the crowd turns its back, you begin to hear something you never heard before, the clarity of your own mind, and that clarity becomes a weapon sharper than any blade. Machiavelli believed that the moment you stop needing others is the moment you truly become yourself, not the version society shaped, not the version others approved, but the version molded by fire, sharpened by struggle, and polished by self-reliance. This version of you is ungovernable by fear. But there is another layer to Machiavelli's darkest law, one that most people are afraid to acknowledge. When everyone is against you, you gain an extraordinary freedom. The freedom to reinvent yourself without scrutiny, the freedom to operate without expectations, the freedom to move in silence because no one thinks you pose a threat. Disapproval becomes camouflage. Doubt becomes your invisibility cloak. Defeat becomes a disguise. You move unseen while others believe you have already lost. And this illusion gives you room to gather strength, build strategy, reshape identity. Machiavelli knew that the enemy who thinks you are broken stops observing you. They stop calculating you. They stop guarding themselves. And that is when your ascent becomes inevitable. You must learn to use their hostility as material. Use their doubt as motivation. Use their betrayal as instruction. Use their judgment as insulation. Every force against you can be inverted, redirected, transformed. This is the alchemy of power that Machiavelli understood so deeply, the conversion of pressure into potency, of isolation into identity, of opposition into opportunity. The world believes that being surrounded means being defeated. But Machiavelli believed that being surrounded means seeing the truth clearly, without illusion, without comfort, without the lies you once clung to. And by facing this unfiltered reality, you step into a dimension of power that few ever reach. When everyone is against you, you must master the art of emotional detachment, not numbness, not cynicism. Detachment, the ability to feel without being controlled by feeling. Your emotions can exist, but they cannot govern your decisions. Your anger cannot dictate your strategy. Your fear cannot dictate your response. Your pain cannot dictate your identity. Machiavelli believed that emotions are the greatest weapon your enemies have against you, and the moment you stop offering them emotional openings, you starve them of leverage. You become unreadable, unshakable, untouchable. People fear what they cannot emotionally influence, and when they realize they cannot provoke you, they lose confidence in their attacks. This is why Machiavelli taught that the strongest individual is not the one who avoids chaos, but the one who remains composed within it. Anyone can think clearly in peace, anyone can strategize in comfort, but only the dangerous few can remain calm under attack, breathe inside the fire, and choose their moves with the same precision they would use in stillness. When the world turns on you and you remain unmoved, you become something rare, a force not defined by circumstance, but by will. And this brings us to the deepest layer of Machiavelli's darkest law, the understanding that the world does not reward the strongest or the smartest, but the one who refuses to yield, the one who refuses to break, the one who refuses to be psychologically conquered. When everyone is against you, the true victory is internal long before it becomes external. The moment you conquer the part of yourself that fears the world loses its power over you. And once the world loses its power over you, no enemy can truly defeat you, because they are fighting a person who has already defeated their own doubt. In this crucible of opposition, you discover the truth Machiavelli preserved for those willing to face it, that power is not handed to the chosen. Power is forged by those who walk alone into the storm and emerge with a gaze that no longer flickers. When everyone stands against you, the greatest transformation occurs not in your circumstances but in your nature. You become someone who no longer negotiates with fear, no longer bargains with comfort, no longer seeks permission to exist. You become someone who moves with intention, with resolve, with an inner silence so focused that the noise of the world dissolves in its presence. This is how you win when everyone is against you, not by overpowering them, but by overpowering the version of yourself that once believed they could break you, not by escaping the darkness, but by mastering it, not by begging the world to turn its gaze, but by becoming someone who no longer cares whether they look or not. Machiavelli's darkest law is not merely a strategy, it is a metamorphosis. And once you undergo it, you are no longer the person the world tried to bury. You become the person the world cannot stop. There comes a moment in every strategic journey where the world's opposition stops being surprising and starts becoming predictable, where the chaos around you no longer feels chaotic, but instead reveals itself as a pattern, a rhythm, a pulse you can feel beneath the noise. Machiavelli understood that this moment is not born from arrogance or delusion, but from a deeper awakening, the realization that when everyone stands against you, they are no longer acting independently. They are moving like a single organism, feeding on shared assumptions, shared fears, shared illusions. And once you see the unity of their hostility, you begin to understand the deeper truth. You are not at war with individuals, you are at war with the collective psychology that binds them. To win against the world, you must learn to defeat not flesh and bone, but the hive mind that directs them, the subconscious current that fuels their judgments and amplifies their aggression. This is where Machiavelli's philosophy slips from strategy into something far darker, into the manipulation of perception itself. Because when everyone stands against you, they are united not by truth, but by a story they believe explains you, a story they believe defines you, a story they believe limits you. And Machiavelli knew that stories, not swords, are what determine victory long before any action is taken. The world forms an identity for you before you have the chance to shape your own, and the moment it does, every gesture you make is filtered through that predetermined lens. If they believe you are a threat, your silence becomes hostility. If they believe you are weak, your confidence becomes delusion. If they believe you are destined to fall, your resilience becomes denial. The world does not see you as you are, it sees you as it has already decided you must be. And when everyone positions themselves against you, the story they have created becomes heavier, harder, more suffocating. Most people collapse beneath that narrative, but Machiavelli believes something radical, that when the world builds a story around you, you can hijack it from within. The moment you understand the story they tell about you, you gain the power to rewrite it, not publicly, not through explanation, not through argument, but through action that contradicts expectation. Machiavelli knew that the most powerful victories are not loud, they are quiet reversals of narrative that force the world to rewrite its understanding of you. And when you rewrite that understanding, you do not merely win, you humiliate your enemies by proving that their certainty was a mask for ignorance. People hate being wrong more than they hate being defeated, and a public shift in narrative is the kind of wound even the strongest pride cannot heal. This is why Machiavelli believed that your greatest strategic weapon when everyone stands against you is not rage, not vengeance, not reaction, but the slow, deliberate redefinition of who you are through actions that contradict their every expectation. To achieve this kind of transformation, you must learn to operate beyond the emotional register of the crowd. The crowd reacts, the crowd panics, the crowd judges. The crowd needs immediate gratification, immediate clarity, immediate certainty. But the individual who aims to rise above opposition must live in a different psychological climate. One where time moves slowly, where impulses are suppressed, where every move is chosen with precision rather than desperation. Machiavelli taught that those who rule their impulses gain an advantage over those who obey them. And when everyone turns against you, your impulses will beg for attention. You will feel the urge to explain, to argue, to justify, to lash out, to seek validation, to demand fairness. But the moment you succumb to these impulses, you play the game your enemies want you to play. You enter the arena they designed. You accept the rules they created. And the second you accept their rules, you lose your ability to reshape the story. They become the narrators, and you remain the character trapped inside their creation. But if you resist, if you silence your impulses, if you detach from the need to be understood, something extraordinary happens. You rise above the crowd's psychology. You begin to see from a higher vantage. You recognize patterns they cannot see. You anticipate moves they have not even considered. You become capable of playing a form of psychological chess while they are still arguing over checkers. Machiavelli would tell you that this level of detachment is not natural. It must be cultivated. It requires the cold discipline of someone who refuses to be shaken by noise. And the noise will be deafening. Rumors, accusations, doubt, betrayal, silence from those you once trusted, mockery from those who once praised you. But if you endure it without reacting, you become something terrifying to those who oppose you. You become unknowable, and the unknowable is always feared. There is a reason Machiavelli placed such value on secrecy. Not just secrecy of action, but secrecy of intention. When everyone stands against you, you must conceal the one thing they seek the most, your direction. People are not actually afraid of who you are, they are afraid of what you might do. They are afraid of your potential, not your present. And when you keep your intentions hidden, when you move without broadcasting your motives, when you build in silence, they cannot form a unified strategy against you. Their attacks become scattered, unfocused, wasted. They begin to guess. They begin to project. They begin to panic. And panic makes them sloppy. Panic reveals their weaknesses. Panic drives them to expose strategies they would normally guard. Machiavelli knew that secrecy is not about deception. It is about forcing your enemies to reveal themselves first. When you are surrounded by opposition, your silence becomes their chaos. The darkest law of strategy is this: the more they speak, the more you learn. The more you remain silent, the more they fear. Silence is a mirror they cannot stand to look into. It reflects their insecurity. It exposes their uncertainty. It forces them to confront the possibility that you are not as defeated as they hoped. And in that uncertainty, they begin to show their hands, their alliances, their fears, their vulnerabilities, their true intentions. You learn to listen not to their words but to the desperation hidden between them. Machiavelli believed that the greatest warriors are not the strongest. They are the ones who understand human weakness. And nothing reveals weakness like the collective hysteria of those who believe they have cornered you. But to use this effectively, you must master emotional invisibility. You cannot allow your face, your tone, your posture, your reactions to betray your inner world. Machiavelli understood that control of expression is control of perception. If they cannot read you, they cannot predict you. If they cannot predict you, they cannot trap you. If they cannot trap you, they cannot destroy you. You must become a mask behind which your true intentions hide, a calm surface beneath which storms gather. People fear masks because masks can hold any identity, any strategy, any hidden power. And when everyone stands against you, the less they understand about you, the more cautious they become, even if they pretend otherwise. This mastery of perception prepares you for the next layer of Machiavelli's law, the art of using your enemy's energy against them. In a world aligned against you, hostility becomes abundant. Fear becomes abundant. Projection becomes abundant. Instead of fighting each force individually, you let them collide with each other. You manipulate angles. You redirect suspicion. You subtly shift attention. Machiavelli understood that enemies rarely share equal loyalty to their cause. They harbor insecurities, jealousies, ambitions, resentments. They want power for themselves even when pretending to unite against you. When everyone stands against you, your task is simple: expose their contradictions. You do not attack their unity directly. You let their internal fractures deepen until unity becomes impossible. A group unified by hatred is the most temporary alliance in existence. It takes only a small spark to turn them against each other, because hatred is unstable fuel. It burns fast, but never burns clean. And as it burns, it consumes itself. Your enemies will watch each other closely, waiting for disloyalty. They will suspect each other of hesitation. They will doubt each other's commitment. And doubt is poison. It spreads quietly, invisibly, until it reaches the root. Machiavelli knew that the greatest victories come not from overpowering the enemy, but from letting the enemy overpower themselves. When you learn to create conditions for distrust among your opponents, you turn their strength into fragmentation. And fragmented enemies are no longer a threat, they are prey. But you must understand something deeper. Machiavelli's darkest law is not merely about reversing the world's hostility. It is about using that hostility as a catalyst for your transformation. When the world is against you, you face a rare opportunity, a moment where pressure reaches its highest concentration. And pressure, Machiavelli believed, is the element that separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. Those who collapse under pressure reveal their limitations. Those who endure pressure discover their true nature. Those who transform pressure into power become unstoppable. Pressure forces evolution. It forces you to shed the weaker parts of yourself. It forces you to develop new instincts, new strategies, new levels of awareness. It forces you to see your life from a vantage point few ever reach. Most people never evolve because they are never truly tested. But when everyone is against you, you face a trial that transforms the architecture of your mind. You develop resilience so deep that fear ceases to control you. You develop intuition so sharp that deception becomes transparent. You develop patience so vast that time bends around your will. And most importantly, you develop a sense of identity that is not built on validation, praise, or applause. It is built on endurance, strategy, and psychological sovereignty. Machiavelli believed that the truly dangerous individual is not the one who has never been broken, but the one who has been broken repeatedly and rebuilt themselves each time with greater precision, greater discipline, greater clarity. When the world turns against you and you refuse to surrender, you undergo this metamorphosis. You stop craving approval. You stop fearing judgment. You stop needing comfort. You stop depending on others to define your worth. You begin to live for a purpose deeper than ego, deeper than pride, deeper than rebellion. You begin to live with strategic intent, with psychological armor, with a mind sharpened by adversity. And once you reach this point, something shifts around you. The world senses it. Your enemies feel it. The energy changes. You no longer react, you act. You no longer chase, you attract. You no longer beg, you choose. And this new presence, this aura born from surviving the collective pressure of opposition, becomes a magnetic force. People who once doubted you begin to question their doubts. People who once opposed you begin to question their alliances. People who once mocked you begin to fear your silence, because they can sense something they cannot name but cannot ignore: a rising, a shift, a return, a gathering storm. This is the phase Machiavelli warned the world about. The moment before the comeback, the moment when the person they tried to destroy re-emerges, not as who they were, but as someone far more formidable. A person who has learned the darkest truths about power, conflict, and human nature. A person who understands weakness because they lived through it. A person who understands betrayal because they tasted it. A person who understands pressure because they survived it. Such a person is no longer a target. They are a threat, and the world knows it. Even if they never admit it, you become the individual who walks into a room and changes the temperature, the one whose presence disrupts the air, the one people watch carefully but speak carefully around, the one who carries an energy carved from adversity, disciplined through silence, sharpened by strategy. And all of this was born from the simple fact that at one point in your life, everyone stood against you. They believed they could break you. They believed they could define you. They believed they could bury you. But they never considered the possibility that the pressure they applied would forge a version of you that would one day rise above them all. And this is where Machiavelli's darkest law reaches its peak. When everyone is against you, you gain the one advantage they can never take back, the knowledge of who you truly are, not the identity assigned by society, not the image shaped by others, not the role you once played, the real you forged in silence, built through struggle, sculpted through opposition. This identity is your ultimate power, because it cannot be threatened, cannot be manipulated, cannot be destroyed. And once you possess this inner certainty, your enemies are no longer giants. They are shadows projected by their own fear. And shadows disappear when you step forward. What happens in the final stage of a long war, when you have survived isolation, betrayal, judgment, and resistance, when you have learned to think in the dark and breathe in the fire? What happens when the world that once united against you slowly begins to realize that you have not broken, that you have not faded, that you have not vanished like they expected? Machiavelli would tell you that this final stage is the most dangerous, not for you, but for them. Because the person who has endured every blow, who has tasted every form of pressure, who has walked alone while surrounded by opposition, is not the same person who first entered the storm. What stands here now is something else entirely, something sharper, something colder, something stronger, something forged not by comfort but by conflict. And the world feels this shift even before you speak, even before you move, even before you strike. There is a moment, subtle but unmistakable, when your enemies realize they miscalculated. They believed the weight of hostility would crush you, that shame would silence you, that fear would paralyze you, that isolation would devour you. They believed you would surrender your will to the world's judgment. What they never expected was that you would use their hostility as material, that you would use their doubt as fuel, that you would turn their attacks into training. They thought they were weakening you, but all along they were creating something far more formidable, and now they sense it. They sense the tension in the air, the quiet returning force, the presence of someone who no longer bows to pressure or expectation, someone who no longer plays the role assigned to them, someone who has learned to control themselves so completely that the world no longer holds power over them. This is the moment Machiavelli understood with frightening clarity. When the world realizes it did not break you, it begins to fear you. Fear does not require aggression. Fear does not require threats. Fear does not require confrontation. Machiavelli believed the most terrifying force in the world is a person who remains calm in the face of hostility, silent in the face of accusation, unmoved in the face of chaos. Because calmness born from delusion collapses quickly, but calmness born from experience, forged in adversity, hardened by solitude, that calmness feels unnatural to the world. It defies the psychological patterns people expect. It reveals a mind that has traveled through darkness and returned with understanding instead of desperation. And people fear what they cannot predict. They fear what they cannot emotionally manipulate. They fear what they cannot shame into submission. But Machiavelli would warn you of something even more profound. Once the world fears you, it will attempt something far more subtle than hostility. It will try to regain control through reconciliation. Those who once opposed you will try to return with apologies dressed in diplomacy. Those who once doubted you will pretend they always had faith. Those who once rejected you will speak as if they never turned their backs. This is not respect, it is strategy. It is the world attempting to reclaim influence over your mind, now that it understands your mind has become independent of its grip. And Machiavelli believed that this moment, where old enemies return with smiles, requires even more intelligence than the moment they arrived with hostility, because hostility is easy to see, betrayal is easy to identify, but reconciliation from those who once attacked you is the most seductive and dangerous deception of all. This is why Machiavelli insisted that true strength does not end when the war ends. True strength begins after the war, because survival can evolve into dominance only if you resist the temptation to soften your guard the moment the noise fades. When everyone was against you, clarity was abundant. You knew who your enemies were. You knew where the pressure came from. But the moment they shift their tone, The battlefield becomes foggy. Motives become blurred. Old alliances attempt resurrection. Old dynamics try to re-enter your mind. And this is where the unprepared fall back into the very traps they once escaped. But you are no longer the person who needed their approval. You are no longer the person who needed their comfort. You are no longer the person who could be persuaded by acceptance or flattered by recognition. You cannot return to the version of yourself that once sought validation from those who would later turn against you, because that version of you died in the storm, and what returned was someone who can never again bend to the illusions that broke you. Machiavelli believed that the greatest mistake a rising individual can make is to forget what forged them, forgetting the isolation that strengthened you, forgetting the doubt that sharpened you, forgetting the pressure that transformed you, forgetting the betrayal that awakened you. Because if you forget, you become vulnerable to the very forces that once sought your destruction. The world counts on your amnesia. It counts on your desire for acceptance to overpower your memory of who rejected you, but you cannot give them that victory. You cannot surrender the psychological sovereignty you earned. You cannot hand them the power you reclaimed through suffering. The world may shift its tone, but you must not shift your vigilance. But vigilance does not mean paranoia. It means awareness. Strategic awareness, psychological awareness, the awareness that every interaction has a motive beneath it, that every gesture has a shadow behind it, that every offering of peace carries a question you must answer silently. Why now? Why return when I am rising? Why offer what you denied when I needed it? Why extend a hand when you once turned your back? These questions are not bitterness, they are wisdom. They are the calculus Machiavelli relied on to survive courts, kings, conspirators, and chaos. The one who survives does so by refusing to confuse sentiment with strategy. And you, who have walked through the crucible, must never again return to emotional innocence. Innocence is not purity. Innocence is vulnerability. And the world is not kind to the vulnerable. It consumes them. But there is another layer to this final stage, one Machiavelli understood but rarely articulated directly. Once you have survived being the one everyone stood against, you carry a kind of knowledge that cannot be taught, only experienced. You carry an understanding of yourself that no praise or rejection can penetrate. You carry a presence that cannot be easily shaken. This presence is not arrogance. It is not ego. It is not superiority. It is simply the quiet knowledge that you endured what was meant to break you. And the moment a person realizes they cannot be broken, the architecture of their entire life changes. Suddenly, the opinions of the world feel small. The threats of the world feel weak. The noise of the world feels distant. You no longer fear loss because you already lost what mattered once and found a way to rebuild without it. You no longer fear betrayal because you already tasted the bitterness of treachery and survived. You no longer fear isolation because you learned how powerful solitude can be. This kind of transformation does not make you reckless. It makes you unstoppable. Not because you are invincible, but because you are no longer controlled by the fears that govern ordinary minds. Machiavelli believed that the strongest individual is the one who stands not on approval, not on connections, not on social protection, but on their own interior foundation, a foundation built through trial, error, collapse, and rebirth. And you have built that foundation, brick by brick, through every moment you wondered if the world was too heavy, through every moment you questioned whether you could endure, through every moment you felt the sting of rejection or the chill of loneliness. But you endured. You adapted. You transformed. And now you stand not as someone protected by the world, but as someone untouchable by it. This is the moment where your power becomes visible, not because you display it, but because it emanates without your permission. Your presence speaks before you speak. Your silence intimidates without threat. Your confidence humbles without aggression, and your calmness disrupts those who once believed they had the ability to shake you. Machiavelli would tell you that this is the moment to begin your ascent, not to seek victory through revenge or domination, but to take the throne of your own life, to govern your mind, your actions, your narrative, your destiny, because the true victory is not defeating your enemies, the true victory is becoming someone. Your enemies cannot defeat. You have learned to move in darkness, to think under pressure, to operate in silence. You have learned to detach from validation and rise without applause. You have learned to see through deception, and recognize the motives behind the mask. You have learned to use adversity as fuel instead of seeing it as punishment. This evolution is rare, it is powerful, it is irreversible. And now you face the question Machiavelli asked of all those who emerged from the crucible. What will you do with the strength you have earned? Because strength without direction is chaos. Strength without purpose is wasted. Strength without application dissolves. And Machiavelli understood that every powerful individual comes to a crossroads where they must decide whether to return to who they were, remain where they are, or ascend beyond everything they once believed possible. This final stage, your stage, is where destiny is shaped, not by force, not by luck, not by circumstance, but by choice. Your choice. You stand now at the edge of your transformation, looking out at a world that once tried to break you, a world that underestimated you, a world that counted you out. You are not the person they remember. You are not the person they dismissed. You are not the person they tried to silence. You are the person who survived them, and survival is not the end of your story. Survival is the beginning of victory. You have learned how to endure pressure, now you must learn how to apply it. You have learned how to withstand attacks, now you must learn how to advance. You have learned how to survive when outnumbered, now you must learn how to win when underestimated. The world that once opposed you will not expect your rise. They will not anticipate your strategy. They will not be prepared for the moves you now know how to make. They will not understand the mind you forged in silence. And that is your advantage. The final, unbreakable advantage Machiavelli believed only those who suffered could ever earn. This is your moment to reclaim everything they said you could not have. This is your moment to rise where they expected you to fall. This is your moment to assert the strength they forced you to cultivate. This is your moment to step into the identity forged through fire, molded through isolation, sharpened through doubt. And now, at the very end of this journey, after darkness, betrayal, pressure, and awakening, comes the final truth Machiavelli left for those who endured what others could not. You do not win by being accepted. You win by becoming undeniable. And now it is your turn to rise, not quietly, not timidly, not with hesitation, but with the full force of the person you have become. They stood against you, they doubted you, they dismissed you, they tried to bury you, and now you must show them the price of their miscalculation. Go forward, stand tall, step into your power, and show the world that the person they tried to destroy is the very person destined to surpass them all. Rise now, because no one is coming to save you, and no one is coming to stop you.